Every day, around 2.4 billion cups of coffee are consumed around the world. To meet this huge demand, millions of people harvest tons of coffee beans. But how are 175,000 jars of coffee producing every day? We visited NESCAFÉ factory to find out how one of the world's most popular drinks is made. Coffee is the second most consumed drink in the world after water. It is believed to have been discovered by a shepherd who noticed his goats becoming more active after eating certain beans. Coffee has been grown for over 1,000 years and is now produced in more than 60 countries around the world. The history of Nescafé dates back to the early 20th century, when Swiss chemist Max Morgenthaler began working on a way to produce instant coffee. In 1930, Nescafé acquired Morgenthaler's patent rights and began producing and marketing instant coffee under the Nescafé brand. The company invested heavily in advertising and promotion, and soon Nescafé became a leading brand in the coffee market. During World War II, Nescafé became a staple food for US and Allied forces, as it was easy to transport and prepare in the battlefield. After the war, Nescafé became a popular product worldwide, and Nescafé continued to innovate in the production and packaging of soluble coffee. The flavor of the coffee depends on the region in which it is grown and the system that producers use to roast and blend the grains. Brazil is the country that produces the most coffee in the world. According to statistics, about 35% of the coffee comes from here. It is born in the shape of these flowers. 9 months later, the shoots are like berries the size of grapes. The harvesting of the coffee from the plantations takes place when it is ripe and can be identified because the fruit becomes an intense red color. From the flowering of the coffee until it can be harvested, it usually takes between 6 and 9 months. In 6 months, the shoots grow and mature into the berry leaves that contain the coffee grain. The day laborers pick the berry leaves and leave the green ones to ripen. They will return to pick the berries from the same plant as they ripen. The day laborers try to make sure there are no more than 2 green berries from every 100 leaves they pick. They empty the baskets into sacks and load them onto trucks. Each basket contains about 2 kilograms of coffee beans, enough to make about 200 cups. Harvesting it by hand is exhausting work, so some of the coffee plantations have resorted to one of these. This 5-meter-high harvester collects the work of 100 people as it moves along a row of trees. The machine vibrates rods inside it that make the berries fall from the branches. The fresher the berry, the better its taste. The berries collected in the morning are stored in a wet mill, ready for processing in the afternoon. In the wet mill, water channels wash the berries and let them fall into a screw conveyor. This loads them into a pulper to separate the outer skin and the fruit. A rotating drum presses the berries against the wall of the depulper and squeezes them so that the grain comes out. From the depulper, the grain is traveled by water to 2 huge rotating cylinders. There they are sieved to separate them from the green and the hard berries that have passed through the depulper. Next, the beans are bathed in more water, which extracts a thick, sugary substance. Then the workers dry them in the traditional way on a concrete patio. For 4 days they will steer the beans with a rake so they can dry in the sun. Once dry, the beans go to a polisher. Inside, huge stones separate the husk from the grain. The dry beans no longer have a husk and go to an oscillating table that separates them by weight into 3 categories. The grains of each category are poured into sacks, whose exact content must be 69 kilograms. Before being sent to the coffee processing plants, the sacks are sewn and stacked for shipment. But how are these coffee beans turned into a quality cup of coffee? Every year, 35 billion tons of freshly harvested fruits arrive at plants like this, one of the largest instant coffee factories in the world. This is Nestlé factory. 890 people work here making instant coffee. 165,000 tons of coffee rice are produced here every day. It all starts with a delivery of coffee beans. 170 tons of beans arrive from South America to this instant coffee factory. Every day, up to 560 tons are stored in this huge silo. Every day, 1,200 bags of raw material enter this plant. To begin, sampling is done, which consists of puncturing each bag and obtaining a sample of the coffee. 2 types of coffee are used in the Nestlé factory: the Arabica variety and the Robusta. Arabica produces a fine and aromatic coffee, On the other hand, Robusta is characterized by a high body and a strong flavor. Once the batch is approved, it enters the production line. The coffee passes through this mesh that retains the larger residues that the bag could bring. Through a piping system, the grains reach the cleaning sector, where they pass through a machine with different sieves that are responsible for eliminating impurities and making the final selection. Once it is clean, it is sent to a silo identified by its variety and type, already specifically destined for the process of making soluble coffee. Then it goes to the roasting phase. The grains are introduced into a roaster. The importance of roasting the coffee is to develop the aroma, color and flavor. Coffee beans are roasted at 210 degrees Celsius. By heating the beans at 210 degrees for 12 minutes, the starches they contain are converted into sugar, and the aromatic coffee is released, giving its flavor to the coffee. Roasting also starts to burn the caffeine. The longer the roasting time, the more caffeine is lost. They are constantly stirred, so that they are roasted evenly without burning. The beans fall into an industrial mill where they are ground into a coarse powder. The roasted and ground coffee beans are transported to this section of the plant. Inside these tanks, operating as if they were large coffee makers, the coffee is mixed with hot water. This process is known as extraction. When in contact with hot water, the flavors, aromas, and properties of the coffee are obtained. The coffee is heated until it condenses into an extract that is spread over a conveyor belt, which will take it to the next station, the freezing room. Every hour, 30,000 liters of coffee travel through the heated pipes inside the tower. Heated to 70 degrees Celsius, the water evaporates and is extracted through the siphon. The freeze-drying method can be used to remove the water. The coffee infusion is frozen at approximately -50 degrees Celsius, causing a thin surface to form which can be broken into pieces and subjected to a vacuum. It is a process characterized by protecting the flavor of the coffee. The workers have to wear thermal clothing to protect themselves from the Arctic temperatures of -50 degrees Celsius. As the liquid coffee moves along the conveyor belt, it receives a blast of cold air. It only takes 2 minutes to solidify, becoming an 8 mm thick, solid sheet of frozen coffee. It then passes through a grinder which breaks it down into frozen granules between 2 and 3 mm in size. The granules came out of the freezer in shallow trays. Each one contains 15 kilograms, enough for 75 jars. They are directed to a lock and introduced into a giant vacuum chamber, where all the air has been sucked out. Then it goes to the drying chamber. The dryer is heated, which melts the ice from the granules, but in the vacuum, the ice immediately turns into gas without going through a liquid phase. It is a process called sublimation. Once the water is removed, the powder coffee reaches the filling machine. Hundreds of glass jars are fed onto a conveyor belt. The jars pass through a conveyor belt and are filled in less than a second. This machine fills 280 jars per minute. It will take more than 11 hours to fill today's batch of 175,000 jars. The coffee packaging is done under vacuum to keep the quality conditions intact for 24 months. The labels are placed on the jars, and they are wrapped in groups of 6. From the factory, the NESCAFÉ jars arrive on the shelves of supermarkets. Like the video if you liked it, and share it with someone else who might be interested. Also, subscribe to this channel by activating notifications to keep learning. Greetings!